the Lady Vols, what do they have to do in order to be deemed a success this season?
Well, they need to guard the inbounds pass with 1.1 seconds to go, and they're up by 2. I would highly recommend that strategy going
Good call.
forward.
Good
Yeah,
call.
just in case that comes up.
Well, as far as levels of the tournament, let me ask you this. To be a success, the Lady Vols need to make it to the Sweet 16, Elite 8, Final Four championship game.
Sweet 16, that got Kellie Harper a raise and a contract extension all the way to 2028 when the Lady Vols accomplished that last season.
Tracy Morgan, what'd you say again?
That's crazy.
Sweet 16 is not a success, John. It's just
Well,
insane.
I'm just saying what happened last year. It's not a success in my eyes, but that got Kellie Harper a raise and a contract extension last season.
What is a success to you, Caleb?
I mean, I don't like to judge tournaments for coaches. I like to make my decisions without regard to the tournament because teams can get red hot, and then Dennis Felton keeps the job.
What do we suddenly have Jimmy Sexton, a college basketball coaches on here?
I'm just saying,
representing them.
So I am like, and if I'm Danny White, in my mind, she's already fired. Okay, and unless she wins a national championship, she's fired. Okay,
now you're definitely Jimmy Sexton because you want her buyout and you want to get somebody else in that position.
Yes, she is fired no matter what she does, unless she wins the national championship. I might consider she makes a Final Four. Neither of those things are happening. But the funny thing is, John probably remembers covering this team, the 96-97 team. Lady Vol fans have spent the last 5 years under this delusion that every Lady Vol team in the NCAA tournament is like that 96-97 team that made that run after having a mediocre regular season. Guys, that's not the same team at all. Okay, that team dealt with so many, and John probably remembers more than I. He covered it. I was very young at the time, but they had so many internal things happening during the season, and it just took them a while to come together, which they did in March.
And that team also had Pat Summitt coaching it.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's a big difference.
John, let me tweak it a little bit. So you wouldn't see it as a success if they make the Sweet 16. I mean, to me, that's kind of baseline, like the men making the tournament. We all agree there, right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's not a success.
So what would be a success for you, John? Or would you already have fired Kellie Harper in the middle of the season like Caleb?
I wouldn't have done it in the middle of the season, although it would have saved that last-second fiasco against South Carolina. I would think, you could say Elite Eight, but when I look at this program, as Caleb mentioned, he doesn't put everything on the NCAA tournament. I think that's a measuring stick. But when I look at the program and the direction of it, there's not as much competition in the women's game. So it's easy for a team like Tennessee to make the tournament. You can have, it's not a great season for me for Tennessee to make the tournament or to make it to the Sweet 16. His has advantages other programs don't have because of its history. So I just think even if Tennessee made the Elite Eight, go back to Holly Warlick, who succeeded Pat Summitt. Holly Warlick took her team to 3 Elite Eights. 3. Made the NCAA tournament every year for 7 years and was fired. So basically Tennessee's administration, albeit a different one then, was saying that's not good enough. We expect more. And if those expectations are the same, then you would make a coaching change. But again, I go back to last season. I don't think Danny White's going to give a coach a raise and extension and then fire a year later when she lost 12 games last year. She's lost 12 this season. One more is coming, 13 losses. So against a really difficult non-conference schedule.
Okay. You're the second person who's brought up that he has no intention of firing her no matter what happens in the tournament. And I'm talking about people with close ties to the Lady Vol program. If that's the case, is this just the new standard? And Tennessee fans need to get used to it, maybe make a run at the Sweet 16? Because you're giving me every indication, and so have other people, that Danny White is not even close to making a change.
Well, Danny White says he wants to contend for championships in all sports. This program in women's basketball is not going to contend for a championship. So to me, if that's your measuring stick, then you do make a change. I think what will happen, the most likely scenario would be Tennessee, the Lady Vols won't. I don't think they can be as good next year as they are this year or last year, because they lose Rakia Jackson, one of the best players in the country. This team is not void of talent. It's got talent. It just hasn't come together. I mean, Jill Spear transfer might have been a top scorer in the ACC last year, one of the top scorers. Jasmine Powell was a good point guard, second team All Big Ten when she was at Minnesota. It's got size, 6'6", Tamari Key. She's not a great player, but that size factors into it, gives opponents problems. It just does. They're not used to playing against somebody 6'6". So it has a lot of things in its favor. It has reasonably good depth, but it's falling short of what the expectations are. This team should have done better than what it's done, but I don't see Danny White making a change now. I think he would make the change next year if the program's still not moving up.
So if they did the exact same thing next year, you think he'd make a change? Let's say they finished this year Sweet 16, 13 losses. Next year, Sweet 16, 13 losses. You think he'd make a change?
I would hope so.
There's no way. He doesn't care. It's not a revenue sport. He doesn't. John, you brought it up. You enlightened me last week. He would rather spend money on that baseball program. It's cooler. It doesn't have an aging fan base, and it is most likely to be better received unless he can find another Pat Summitt, and those only come along about once every 100 years. He doesn't care.
I know. Here's the one reason why I might care. I think ADs, it looks good on the resume, and Tennessee's done very well overall at this, succeeding in every sport. That's something people point to when they look at an athletic director. They look at hires, they look at money, fundraising, and they look at how are you doing in all sports, even the ones that aren't revenue sports. Most of them aren't revenue sports. Tennessee has a pretty viable softball program. Of course, it's good in baseball. Football's coming up. It's good in a lot of sports. So as an AD, you would think he would want to maintain that and would want to contend for championships. Why not? You have all the resources you need here at Tennessee to contend for championships.
Caleb, do you think if he really opened up his heart and you gave him the truth serum and you asked Danny White, would you rather make the College World Series or make the Final Four in women's basketball? What do you think he would say?
I mean, he would say make the College World Series, but I'm with John. I don't think that doesn't mean there's not a standard he's going to hold women's basketball to. I think that, again, now, if you ask would he open the checkbook for a women's basketball coach, probably not. But Danny White is I keep telling you guys, is the best hirer of coaches in athletic director history. That's an award you could win, okay? And so if anybody could find a coach for cheap for women's basketball, Danny White would be the guy. And so why not try to improve the program? You do like, Dave, what you're saying is be the athletic director of the football program and then men's basketball and maybe baseball to a degree, and then don't even try to set a standard for every other program. No, athletic directors, even if they care about the revenue producing sports, they want to set a standard. And it's so very clear that Kellie Harper can't coach. It's funny, John, you brought up Tamari Key. Because Tamari Key, everybody's like, oh my gosh, she's the shot blocking machine. Yeah, and that's all she's been for 5 years with the program. She literally can't do anything else after 5 years of playing for Kellie Harper. Can you not develop this person just a little bit as a player?
Well, that's a good point. I mean, she really hasn't developed other aspects of her game. Now, you can say part of that is on the player, and she had a medical issue that sidelined her for a year. That's a factor in it too. But before the medical incident, she wasn't developing really. She relies on her size, and that does affect opponents. Um,
And
but
nothing else.
when you bring up the coaching thing, see, to me, there's a core of fans that care about women's basketball here because of what Pat Summitt did, winning 8 national championships. And there's a statue of Pat Summitt across from the arena. Fans haven't forgotten that. Here's where remember how unpopular Dave Hart became as AD when he really goofy decision to change the Lady Vols in all other sports to just call them the Vols. The fan reaction was overwhelmingly opposed to that. I think it ultimately led to his firing. Okay, if Danny White hires a coach, and as Caleb pointed out, he's really good at this. His track record tells it all. If he hires a coach who turned this program around and made it a championship contender, imagine how the fans would react to that. This core of Lady Vols basketball fans, how it react. He'd be a hero for saving a program that just was going downhill. So there would be incentive, not maybe that much financially, but there would be incentive for him to succeed in a sport where Tennessee was once dominant. He could bring it back.
Wow, is he going to get as much credit for that as building a baseball program, Caleb, which he's done and it continues to do?
Actually, yes, because he would get more. And this is the other thing that athletic director arrogance, they like the credit for their success. If no matter what Tennessee baseball does, if they do it with Tony Vitello, John Curry is going to get the credit for that. He's the one who hired Tony Vitello. I mean, Dave Hart's the one getting credit for Rick Barnes right now and the success he had. It's unfortunately for Philip Fulmer, he's the one athletic director now who doesn't have a coach who doesn't even have one good hire to his resume. Every other athletic director at Tennessee had at least one, and Fulmer's got none. But
that's shocking that turned out that way.
Well, he'll always have Dave Clawson. So there you go. There's
he got a nice severance package for failing in every one of his hires, didn't he?
And every one of his fires. Yes, when he got fired, you got a nice severance package as well. John, what do you ultimately think the Lady Vols will do this upcoming NCAA tournament? And brought to you by BetUS.
America's favorite sportsbook and casino. Live betting and racebook. We're celebrating 30 years with a historic offer. A 125% sign-up bonus on your first 3 deposits. Plus 10% gambler's insurance. Get started today. BetUS, where the game begins.
John, what would you bet the Lady Vols do? Because our poll question is what would be deemed success for the Lady Vols. We'd love for you to vote on that. Sweet 16 does get 35% of the vote. Final 4 gets 35% of the vote. Elite 8 gets 18% of the vote. Championship game, win or lose, gets 12% of the vote. So a lot of people think the Sweet 16 is just fine. I think that's sad.
Well, I don't think the Lady Vols are making the Sweet 16. They would have to beat NC State on its home court. NC State has decent size, a balanced team, and a really good coach in Wes Moore. The irony there is thick. NC State fired Kellie Harper as its coach. Wes Moore, who's been there quite a while now, formerly who coached at, I guess it was MTSU, Chattanooga maybe. A lot of Tennessee ties there. He's had great success there. He took the program to the Elite 8 once. He's won a bunch of games in a tough conference. So I think I just can't see Tennessee winning that game. So it'll go out in the second round.
Any chance they make a change then?
No.
Caleb, does that shock you? Round of 32? That's okay.
I mean, it shocked me if they went to the Sweet 16, but it's I'm disagreeing with, but I still think they make a change. I think they make a change. I think they make a change because Danny White knows that it's not going to be that expensive for him to hire the right coach with the Lady Vols. This is a chance to make his mark on another sport, and coaches like to make their mark, or athletic directors like to make their mark. They have a level of arrogance about them to do that.
Yeah, but speaking to that arrogance, Caleb, do you want to be the AD that gave a coach a raise and a contract extension, and then a year later, with not that great a difference in record, you get rid of her? Doesn't that speak to your previous failure?
I think raises and contract extensions are overrated. I think that's just part of the process of like hitting certain things as a coach, but that doesn't necessarily mean your job is safe. I've never really considered it that way. I mean, I think that I've never really considered a raise or a contract extension a reflection of an athletic director. I've always considered that they're just trying to, for the PR sake, saying they're still committed to a coach, but that doesn't mean that behind the scenes they're not willing to fire him. Only Dave Hart publicly undercut a coach's contract one time, because as you guys remember, he basically all but said after 2011, Derek Dooley's a dead man walking because I'm not renewing anybody's contracts on this staff.